Well, hello, everyone. Buonasera a tutti. I'm happy to welcome you back to the American Academy in Rome for Shoptalks. And for those of you new to us or watching this later, I'm Elizabeth Brodini. I'm the Andrew High School Arts Director here in Rome. And I have the pleasure of introducing tonight's speaker. And typically we have two talks, but the roll of the dice and other realities sometimes mix that up a bit. So tonight we have a solo presentation from an artist I have come to know pretty well over the last year as we have woven in and out of this pandemic season together, and that is Corinna Gosmaro. Corinna is the Fondazione Sviluppo e Crescita CRT, excuse me, let's start over. Corinna is a Fondazione Sviluppo e Crescita CRT Italian Fellow in Visual Arts here at the American Academy. And I'm going to start her bio with the most recent, really fabulous news, which is that Corinna has just been named a 21-22 resident at the Fondation Fiminco in Paris. And this is an 11-month residency during which Corinna will continue to explore, and I'm quoting her here, the timeless characteristics of the human being intended as a cultural and global entity. Her practice crosses media, cultural paradigms, scenarios, and landscapes, converging in what she describes as a proxemic universe that highlights the loop in which we exist and organize our being. Corinna is a native of Piedmont and now works between Paris and Rome. Lucky Corinna. She's been artist in residence at Viborg Kunsthal in Denmark and has participated twice in the Cité Internationale des Arts in Paris with projects connected to her American Academy work under the overarching title of Trigger. She has also exhibited in Italy and abroad, most recently at the Gallery Apart in Rome in 2020. The Fondazione Memmo as part of their conversation piece part 6, also in Rome in 2020, at the Espace Le Carré in Lille in 2019, and other spaces in Paris, Freising, Germany, London, Weihai in China, and Boissy-le-Châtel in France. In 2017, she won the Sei Artista Prize, promoted by the Fondazione Pastificio Cerere, and in 2018, the Talent Prize from Inside Art. And she's not brand new to the American Academy. I had the great fun of working with her last year for the 2020 edition of our Cinque Mostre project, Convergence. And I'm really enjoying watching her develop her installation for our presentation of outdoor sculpture this June, alongside her fellow Italian fellows in the arts for our 2021 Streetscapes initiative. And that is going to run from about June 7th to June 21st. So please stay tuned. Corinna's talk tonight is titled Triggering the Loop. Corinna.
So I'm gonna share my screen. So first of all, I want to thank the American Academy in Rome and the Fondazione CRT for giving me this precious opportunity, and Elizabeth, of course, for the amazing presentation. It is such an honor for me to be surrounded by other artists and researchers with whom I have been having a very enriching dialogue. I will try to give you a short general presentation of my work in order to present what I am doing here in the second part of my talk. With my work, I try to reflect on the timeless characteristic of the human being, who I intend as a cultural and global entity. Although I always try to assume a perspective able to highlight the fact that our presence on Earth is among other species. My practice moves on the border between painting and all the other media, and with the attempt to converge cultural paradigms, domestic scenarios, and the evocation of landscapes, I try to highlight the various loops in which we find ourselves organized. For explain better what I mean with my last sentence, I will use the words of the American philosopher Alba Noe that in Strange Tools says, "We are organized, we get organized, we are organisms. Our lives are structured by organized activities in the large, in the small. Our lives are one big complex nesting of organized activities at different levels and scales. Talking, walking, eating, perceiving, driving. We are always captured by structures of organization. This is our natural, indeed our biological condition. It is the basic fact about us. And crucially, these structures of organization are not of our own making. We don't direct or orchestrate or invent the dynamic patterns that organize us when we walk, look, listen, breastfeed, or talk. We are not exactly slaves to them, for our participation in such practices is in many ways precisely the exercise of our agency. It's how we make friends, find mates, get from point A to point B, recognize people in the crowd. But we are, or at least liable to get, lost in the complex patterns of organization that makes up our lives. What does all this have to do with art? It suggests that art has its origins in this basic fact about us, and that it is a practice for bringing our organization into view, and while doing this, it reorganizes us, a real loop. Even if I have the feeling that I paint on everything I do, I don't consider myself as a painter. I don't even consider myself as an artist who's explored painting. But I hope to not be misunderstood if I say that I consider myself as a human being who cannot avoid painting in order to perceive the world all around, and especially to perceive the being I am. In the recent years, painting has received much more attention, and that makes totally sense to me. I strongly believe that it is because although its absorptive capacity has made it as an extremely heterogeneous medium, it has also obstinately maintained itself, as Foucault put it. Painting dies art, and I totally agree with Isabel Groth that in The Love of Painting argues that the high status of this medium is above all explained by its intellectual prestige. Its flat pictorial arrangement and the limitation of its surface force it to be literally open for speculation and narrations. In the last few years, I've been working on the ongoing research project called Trigger, that stems from the need to question the paradox inherent to the human condition. The death and the preservation drives are strictly linked. Such dichotomy is one of the driving force of human knowledge, and it is at the basis of every kind of culture. About 50,000 years ago, during behavioral modernity, our species started to show the presence of a symbolic thought, and also it started to express a cultural creativity coinciding with the origin of language. From this moment on, art, the care of objects, and the tendency toward decoration are deeply connected to the awareness that every single human being has their own caducity. This consciousness has led humans through a relentless pursuit of the creation of timeless objects or cultural phenomena, able to survive the single existence and conveying imaginative process up to the present day. All of this consideration led me to look at the narration as the common denominator of every manifestation of the human being, a narration able to trigger a complex system of multiple narrations. If you think about that, the interpretation of the reality rises from the perception that flows in the art, that slides in the history, that fits the memory, but always avoiding a linear structure and being continuously changing. The cognitive psychologist Chris Fried says, our perception of the world is a fantasy that coincides with reality. And I think we can use the same sentence like a metaphor of a painting. The exhibition's title of my solo show in 2018, Talking Knots, evokes objects formed by 5 threads of ropes interlacing each other that in some South American cultures and traditions used to have ornamental, ritual, and communicative functions. You may have known them as quipus. Blending the here and now of the painting act with the temporally, geographically, and culturally cross-cutting nature of the symbol, I'm interested in manipulating some major elements that have accompanied mankind throughout history, characterizing its passages and evolutions through their intrinsic expressive power. I conceived the exhibition space divided in 2 dimensions, the ritual one at the first floor and the domestic field in the basement. This division is not clear on purpose because of the entangled nature of these 2 dimensions. In the first floor, you can see the work I produced starting from the study of the pre-dynastic cosmetic palette. Used to green cosmetic paints in order to obtain pigments, palettes soon became and remained for centuries commemorative and ceremonial items with different meanings, to become later a language in the form of proto-writing and transition moment toward hieroglyphics. My research is therefore interested not so much in the field of ritual related to death, but rather in the rituality related to the archetypical, expressive, and iconic meaning of an object that cannot be interpreted univocally and which indeed involves multifaceted meanings like offer, ornament, identity sign, magical instrument. So my work evokes the shape of the original palettes that in the pre-dynastic Egypt accompany the everyday life, as well as the journey toward the afterworld as a funerary goods. Originally, the palettes were shaped in animal silhouettes related to the preponderant presence of the Nile River, like fish, turtles, water birds, hippopotamus. And that we underline the universal value of the object and its prerogative of including rituality, artistic insight, and cultural innovation. The formal identity between the objects used ritually and those used for decorating the body, the latter characterized by the dominance of color red, introduced to the environment that I organized in the basement of the Gallery of Art here in Rome. Here, the experience should be like entering into a sort of palette environment characterized by a strong domestic flavor, which is reinforced by the presence of a pair of pottery dogs. The painting becomes enveloping. Trace of it can be found in the carpet, whereas big filters hang from the wall as an explicit reference to the scapes work that I have been realizing for a long time by painting industrial filters. In 2020, the curator Marcello Smarrelli invited me for Conversation Piece, Part 6, an exhibition at Fondazione Memmo here in Rome, inspired by some of the fundamental principles of the New Realism. In the Manifesto of New Realism, published in 2012, the Italian philosopher Maurizio Ferrari emphasizes on the necessity of not so much a new theory of reality, but a work that knows how to distinguish with passion and case by case what is natural and what is cultural, what is built and what is not, opening the great challenges, ethical and political, and redesigning a new space for philosophy. The subtitle of the exhibition, Reality is that which, when you stop believing in it, doesn't go away, is a significant quotation from the essay How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 2 Days Later by the renowned science fiction writer Philip K. Dick. And it seems to invite us to adopt a worldview that is firmly anchored in the concreteness of the reality. I conceived for the entrance of the exhibition a single installation entitled Aria Calda, or Air, where a red carpet, which the public can walk across, delimits an area in which I installed 2 sets of works. One big painting on polyester filter and a group of sculptures attached to the walls made with the brass tubing with which endrays are constructed. These works are not only based on the simple observation of reality, but they are created from material and objects with a specific use. In fact, the painted air filters are normally used for manufacturing air conditioning and heating systems, as well as extractor hoods for kitchens. I try to explore their physical characteristics of porosity, transparency, and lightness, as well as their large dimension, to produce lyrical images reminiscent of a blurred landscape seen from the window of a moving vehicle. With this installation, I try to encourage to touch, to cross, amplifying as much as possible the idea of a passable and interactive experiential space, which draws from an ancestral need of the human being to leave tangible signs of his presence, giving life at a certain moment in history to those artifacts that we call today works of art. The use of endrays was new for me. In this case also, I chose to adapt a physical material which is tangible in a very literal way and which can record the presence of people who come into contact with through their fingerprints. The work thus becomes a diary, a guestbook, where each viewer can leave a tangible trace of his or her visit, participating in the slow transformation on the surface of the metal through the chemical agent produced by the body, making a contribution to what is, to all intents and purposes, a work in progress. Arranged upon the walls at different heights, the sculptors try to evoke an unseen architectural structure, which the visitor is invited to mentally rebuild and enter into with a gradually ascending movement. My last solo exhibition, Chutzpah, is in continuity with the creative journey I embarked on since the beginning, when my pictorial works on industrial filters intended to generate landscapes as an attempt to blend perception, cognition, memory, and emotional resonances. In my work, time and places are elements free from any chronological or geographical linearity. They are indeed pieces of knowledge that can be exploited to investigate archetypes, images, shapes, or objects representative of the fundamental creative moment in the history of humanity. The search of the archetype is not aimed only at the creation of the work of art, but rather the latter is the final result of a transversal process for the identification of a possible behavioral matrix. It is a method of thinking and working that draws inspiration from neuroscience, that explores the correlation between memory and imagination in terms of chronostasia or mental time traveling, that it is the capacity to mentally reconstruct past personal experience as well as to imagine possible scenarios in the future. I am interested in combining in an organic way the inputs from the mnemonic processes with the suggestion unleashed by imagination, thus emphasizing a state of mind even more than a conceptual path, and triggering a sort of psychophysical condition that I define by the word chutzpah. Although the original etymology of this Yiddish word means impudence or insolence, over the years it has taken on a broader semantic value referring to the quality of audacity, for good or for bad, such as courage, ardor, mettle. In conceiving the exhibition, I associated the concept of chutzpah to the Baudelairean idea of spontaneity as the rapidly intuitive outcome of knowledge and intelligence. Baudelaire's thinking shows a strong affinity with the modern debates as it envisages the union of the associative power of the imagination with the capacity of devising something new based on the mass of materials accumulated and stored by memory. The works on display try to embody the exaltation of the creative act and the intrinsically impertinent power of each work. The staircase becomes a metaphor for ascension and descension of the thought, but its shape emphasizes the non-linearity of the movements of the human soul. The handrails are reminiscence of the mental scaffolding that move on different and transversal temporal planes, a deviation between past, present, and future, oblivious of the temporal dimension as well as the linear direction. The drawings and the zoomorphic rock sculptures introduce an animalistic dimension that evokes the foundation of an evolutionary vision in global perspective, not only of the cultural history of the human species. So here at the American Academy in Rome, I have been working at the second chapter of Trigger, which has started in the spring of 2017, thanks to the help of the Egyptian Museum in Torino, where I've got the honor to work along with the researcher and curator Federica Ugliano in order to study closely the collection of the pre-dynastic cosmetic palette, but also where I ran for the first time into the Jubilant Canvas, which is the main subject of my research here at the American Academy. It is possible to draw the entire evolutionary and cultural history of the human species, looking at the change in the perception of death and through the analysis of objects which are close to the funeral rite. This resulting history is deeply connected to the reason why human beings still produce art, because the fear of death always involves the creative drive. The same notion of death is a narration, the evidence of the human creative process. In general, this research, as I mentioned before, stems from the need to question the paradox inherent to the human condition. In practice, this research aims to identify a collection of objects and situations representative of a fundamental creative moment in the cultural evolution of the human being. These objects must be resulting from the simultaneous presence of the right, artistic intelligence, and cultural innovation. What I like to do is to try to re-establish the circularity with their starting point, namely the creative drive, by underlining the role that they have played in the constitution of the creative process that has accompanied art until today. Another loop. The Jubilant Canvas is a movie, my first movie actually. of a maximum duration of 10 minutes where the main subject, which is the oldest painting on canvas ever found, never appears. It is a short film that combines animation, filmmaking, documentary film, collage, and of course, painting. The subject, known as the painted Jubilant Canvas, it dates back about to 3,600 years before Christ. It was found on the Jubilant site in 1930 by Giulio Farina, and it is currently preserved at the Egyptian Museum in Torino. It represents a very important testimony because the fragments remain illustrate through images the daily life and the community life of the time, with scenes related to hunting, dance, and navigation. What we know is that it was woven on a horizontal loom. Was mysteriously not supposed to wrap up the body of a disease, which is very uncommon for the time. I conceived this movie as a dialogue on the paradox of describing an object so distant from our perception and the impossibility of seeing it in its original state, with the aim of further expanding its meaning by adding a subsequent narrative. There are no real actors, as there is no real script. I imagine a spontaneous dialogue in which voices talk about the artifact in its absence, trying to reveal the poetic and the narrative force of the speculation itself. The method used to obtain sufficient spontaneous dialogue will be the workshop form, where a limited presentation of the object will be given to a group of selected people from different age and backgrounds, and in order to stimulate their imagination, at the same time, it will be told a selection of fairy tales. Each tale, it will be chosen by considering the great themes concerning the artifact itself. For example, hunting, nature, dance, discovery, as I mentioned before. And I expect fairy tales to work as a real interference in the cognitive and imaginative process, because finally the group will be asked to make sense of this mysterious object, talking about it and asking questions, or even inventing a fairy tale. I expect questions such as, why was this object put in the grave? Was it chosen for its beauty? Are we talking about the first painting in terms of art? Question that seems to suggest that the most powerful aspect of an important object such as the Jubilant Canvas is the narration that we can build from it and on it, the memory that the human being has of it. Thanks to the interference of the fairy tale, which will also take place on a visual level in my movie, however, I expect more phantasmagoric and free theories to emerge, capable of restoring the image of a collective memory as one of the most creative characteristics of the human being. As you can imagine, the workshop is only the starting point of this film. It is the tool which obtains spontaneous dialogues, from which extrapolate possible narratives and fantasies that are triggered by the speculation on artifacts as dancing meaning as the Jubilant Canvas. This kind of narration goes far beyond mere historical reconstruction, because being stimulated by an object which is recognized as the first are capable of creating real loops of thought, where each line of thinking from time to time incorporates different aspects of our way of perceiving and staying in the world, creating a kind of a snowball effect that starts back in our origin. The meaning of this type of object intensifies the meaning of our very existence, which makes it in turn even more precious, and so on. And here we have another loop. What remains of the Jubilant Canvas strikes us. Our strings resonate with the fragments left off only at the thought of their existence. We don't need to see them directly. We just need to know that they exist to be pushed into a time vortex. The Jubilant Canvas is familiar to us even when it can no longer be, because it does not exist, except in the meaning that we give to it. The workshop consists in grouping 2 or 3 people at a time and encouraging them to discuss the artifact without seeing it, but while contemplating the landscape. The aim is to ask them to speculate on the Jubilant Canvas, to imagine it, and to deduce information in a spontaneous way. It is my intention to guide them as little as possible, giving them only what is strictly necessary to trigger the conversation among them, but also to lead them slightly astray in order to obtain free and phantasmagorical theories. For this reason, the workshop will have a maximum duration of 16 minutes per group. Will be divided into 3 moments. the introductory moment, the fairy tale moment, and the free moment. To make the dialogue freer and prevent people from entering into an overly performing dimension, I intend to record the audio with a microphone and to film the scene from behind and slightly from afar. It is important that the group get lost as much as possible in the exchange and in the contemplation of the landscape, forgetting to interact with me and my team. The set will be a Sardinian landscape with a white horizon, not famous but peculiar, as natural as possible, and with references to the past or to the future, for example, with remains in the view or building under construction. The group will be able to sit or stand if they want, but they will have to stay there, facing the view chosen for them. Thanks to the help of the Sardinia Film Commission, which produces this very first step of my movie, I will recruit an heterogeneous group of candidates with different nationality and cultural backgrounds, at least one child, and I will film the workshop in 3 different locations. Other than that, I have literally no idea about how my movie will be. It is actually always like this, but perhaps this is the reason why I do what I do. The loop has been triggered. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinna. Let's see, do you want to turn off the screen share? There, great. You can see everyone. That was fascinating. And I think your project is so perfect for the Academy because first of all, it seems like it's really taking you in extraordinarily new directions. And I can imagine it's requiring and inviting you to talk to lots of people about lots of different things. So I think it's great. And I love that in your studio, we've seen the work you've done in the past, and then you're doing something that's, I love the constant invention that's going on. And we're going to start with questions from the audience. People can use the usual raise hand feature. But I thought I would start with a question that's really just about your medium and what it is meaning for you to start thinking in film. It seems, it's a leap into the unknown. You ended by saying sort of all your work is a leap into the unknown, but it seems to me that it allows you to do so many things that you're thinking about, like this sort of, so much of your work is sort of about these leaps across time, right? From these ancient sort of Neolithic, practically, symbols to extremely modern materials. And film maybe allows you to think about time in all sorts of new ways. So I'm wondering if you can just tell us a little bit about how working in a filmic medium is just changing how you're thinking about your process.
Well, it's a very good question because I haven't chosen to use the form of the movie just because I like that, but it was this kind of research that pushed me in that direction. Because when I ran for the first time with the Jubilant Canvas, and it was in 2017, I immediately decided to do a work about that. And I started thinking about that. And I immediately erased the possibility to make a painting about the first painting because it was too tautological. So I started thinking, I started studying this artifact, even if there are not so many there is not so many material. And talking with curators and friends, I realized that the most important thing was all the questions that were triggered by this kind of object. So at first I thought about writing a text. But then as I say in my presentation, I saw many possibilities in also link that work with our real nature here and about how it's beautiful, the speculation in general. It's so poetic. It's very poetic when you talk with the people that work with this artifact. You start talking about very poetic and narrative. I don't know how to explain, but I also thought, okay, I want to film the person when he's talking about that. And I also just after understood that it was not just one person talking about that, but it was the dialogue, like the loop triggered by the discussion. And the only media that led me to show that process, it was the movie. So I approach that media, and sometimes I don't know what I am doing. And for that reason, I have a team. I ask to people that know more than me, and I try to learn all the time. And that's it.
Great. Well, I admire again your courage in taking on something completely new. And we have a lot of hands up now. People needed a moment to digest, I think, the complexity of your work, but now the floodgates are opening. So I think Alex Kleeman, you were first.
Thanks so much. Corinna, as you know, I love your work and I love that presentation. And one of the things that I know we've been talking about while we've been here is our mutual interest in cognitive science, our love for people like Alva Noe. And it strikes me that you're exploring some of the extremely human phenomena that are completely left out of the discourse of cognitive science, pretty much. What do you think that art has to offer our exploration of these practices and behaviors that are so essential to being human, but are also so difficult to study in a laboratory?
Well, this is a very beautiful and hard question to reply because if I had the reply, I would have a theory probably. But I am wondering about this so much actually so far. And because first of all, I'm wondering all the time if it's my duty to think about that while working, because I don't want to, there is a part of the cognitive science when you approach the arts that usually approach also an attitude to describe the objects or the work of art. And this is not the key for me, because what an artist can do, why cognitive science keep studying, is showing the lateral process that actually is like showing basically that forgetting what actually the process, how the process is described. They have to, in my opinion, try to find a way to work much closely, because it cannot be only description and on the other hand just practice. But I don't think that finally the work of art had to have this duty, but I think that they have to walk like close to each other in a parallel path, always speaking and talking to each other, but never, and always trying to don't fall in the field of the other, because otherwise it can be too tautological or it can be a mistake, because then it can be just like I don't know how to explain that, probably just the activity of the theories, and it is like the artist should not know anything about the cognitive science. Sometimes I think about that, but, or know enough, but forget that when it's working. Because when you work, you don't have to think about that. You have to just forget and do what you are doing, and not like do a homework or trying to translate the theory in the work. This is my personal position as an artist.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm not very immersed in cognitive science myself, but it seems like the way you're working with symbols really falls into that mode of somewhere between kind of literal explanation and imaginative representation. And I was thinking a lot about symbolism, and kind of the archetypal symbol is so powerful in the way it runs through your work. I think Avinoam, I'm just going to go in order here.
Thank you. Thank you, Corinna. I really enjoy your talk. Now that you just mentioned how the artist should forget, I'm actually, as an art historian, try to remember. And I because some of your works, if I try to put them in a historical context, call our call our remembrance of Max Ernst. Max Ernst, in that sense that there is your interest in art before history, your interest in specific forms that are Neolithic in that sense that they are not yet a form, and I can see even specific images of Max Ernst's painting. That means that I'm trying to take your discussion of imagination into the discussion of surrealism, back to surrealism. What is surrealism? I'm sorry that I'm not clear. It's just what came to my mind, but these are 2 points. I mean, the art before history and the imagination and surrealism. In a way, the word that Elizabeth just mentioned now, the symbolic form, is also something that could put into this discussion. The second is not a question, it's just at the beginning, and especially the wonderful sculpture of this handrail that you design cannot be not part, for me, understanding of what Willem Flusser, the philosopher, would speak about object and how they design our way of action. But you brought it into a kind of, again, of a surrealistic moment that it is a riddle which is nice to look at. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm just so sorry because I lost you when you had the first question, I guess. So I asked you to repeat that because I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, I don't know if it is my Wi-Fi, but I'm used to it. My Wi-Fi is also not that strong, probably like yours. So I'm used to keep repeating myself. Well, the first question was, first of all, from my side as an art historian, looking at history, trying to remember rather than to forget, I'm trying just to ask you how do you put yourself vis-a-vis the surrealism and the work of Max Ernst, mainly in your interest in art before history? Yeah.
Well, this is a very beautiful question. First of all, I love Max Ernst really much. So probably you can see that because I love him. The question about my relationship, how I put myself in terms of surrealism, I don't know actually how to reply, because first of all, I was always consider myself like very realistic. But starting from the point that arts and artists, even if they are exploring the reality, when they are doing something with the work of art, it will never be the reality. So this was a question that I had when I had this exhibition about the neuralism here in Fondazione Memmo. And I thought that, and I say that to Maurizio Ferraris, I guess, or to the Marcello Smarrelli. As an artist, I cannot give you the reality, just the reality. So of course, we are more in the domain of the surrealism, but I'm not, I mean, to me, the surrealism can be very realistic in terms that it put invent a word that actually say much more about our reality, is much more true about our reality. And this is linked also with the question that Alex asked me before. As an artist, we always, even when we are approaching the cognitive science, the reality, we have to keep going to do products that are like actually something out of the reality, because they help us and the humanity to understand reality. So I don't know if I am a surrealist, but surely I consider my approach is always realistic. But I will never do a realistic work.
That's a pretty high compliment to be compared to Max Ernst.
Yes, yes, definitely.
David Serlin.
First of all, grazie, Corinna, and thank you for that really interesting talk. And I think it probably speaks to the power of what you're doing, that so many of us are kind of seeing these similar things, because like Alex, I was thinking about cognitive science, and like Avinoam, I was thinking about, and also Elizabeth, thinking about periods of the history of art. But I want to ask you a very different kind of question. It's something that you and I have talked about with regard to sensory interactions. And I guess I wanted to ask you to say something more about your use of the air filter as your canvas / medium, and the way that I forget which institution you installed it at, but the one with the very bright red carpet, very sort of regal carpet. The combination of the air filters, and then on the walls, these very interesting sort of bone-like shapes that have that metal that is sort of interacting with air, and seems to have some kind of oxidization process.
Exactly, it's exactly that.
And does it change in the era of COVID? Having something on an air filter suddenly seems to mean something a little bit different.
Yeah. It's funny because I was thinking, right, that our interactions with objects in a gallery space, or in any kind of space, obviously is interesting on its own. But then this question of what does breathing and other forms of kind of ambient interaction with objects, what might that mean in an era when gallery spaces are potential vectors of contagion?
Well, these polyester filters are actually for cleaning the air in the aeration system, so they are pretty safe. And I mean, I don't think there is correlation with the moment that we are living. But talking about the material and trying to reply to your beautiful question, you named the sensoriality, the sensoriality of the material of the work. And when I started working with the polyester filter, it was in 2013. I was not aware of everything that I am saying right now, but I remember perfectly just the fact that when I saw that in the Brico Center that I had the feeling that it was much more beautiful than a normal canvas, because it was soft, just seeing this. So the tactility of this material is something that really catch me from the first moment, at first sight. And also, this material is like a wire of polyester fibers, like casually, and it's three-dimensional. The light can filter them, and you can have the feeling to have in your hand a piece of neuronal wire. I don't know if I am explaining myself. It seems that something that reminds neurons, and I was thinking about the memory at the time, and it was the perfect support for painting something about memory, and to paint a landscape that is not the landscape that you are describing, but much more the symmetry of all the landscape that you have seen. And I needed to also make a kind of work that it was soft. If you saw in my presentation, when I showed this landscape that seems a mat basically on the wall, they are soft, there are different layers of polyester, and you have the feeling when you are watching it to immerse yourself in something soft. So I haven't choose that before, but surely all of this information, the sensitivity, I don't know how to say it, are in the material itself. And it is the reason why I choose that. So I would like all the time to keep talking about the thing I'm talking about, but giving to the person, to the viewer, a soft sensation, because I want to in some way embrace I don't know, I want that it's something soft and is important, because I'm talking about the human being in general. I'm talking about emotions, not mine, never mine, but in general. So it has to be soft. It has to be something that you can feel in your body, even if you are not touching it. I don't know if I've replied.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank
I thought
you.
it was a beautiful answer, actually. Maggie.
Corinna, thank you so much for that presentation. It's funny, just when Alex was asking her question about art, showing us things that cognitive science can't, it was funny because when you were describing your setup for how you're creating this video and kind of not interviewing, but recording people, it sounded so much like the setup for laboratory experiments about the cognitive science of memory that I read. But my question is actually was triggered by the title of your project. And it seems like so much of what you're talking about, emotions, like domesticity, memory, life and death, they're all sort of double-edged, right? There's really positive connotations, but also potentially negative ones as well. And I'm wondering, maybe this is because I'm in academia and we're in a moment where I'm always having discussions about like putting trigger warnings on my syllabi, but there's this other kind of connotation to the word trigger that can have a connotation of negative emotions or trauma. And I was just wondering if this is something that you think about when you're making these works under the title, under this broader project.
Always, because it's actually, thank you, really, because you actually explained basically how I perceive the word. I can be very positive, but I think that there is a big negative part, but this is not a problem. I can be very cynical, and I want to translate that with my work. I'm not here for say the word is beautiful, we are human beings, and everything has to be celebrated. We have to celebrate the human beings. There are different negative aspects in this two polarity. The dichotomy is exactly what is triggering me in my research. So I like the fact that you have the clear feeling that there are the two way, and I think I love the word trigger and the verb triggering, because it is exactly that. And we also always have a counterpart that is negative, and I'm not just saying in a very trivial way, positive and negative, like the opposite, but we are also living in a very, very hard time. And I'm not just only talking about the pandemic, global pandemic, but our world is in really danger. And also, I don't know, I mean, life is for most of the part very bad for everyone. I mean, but it's okay. It's push us to actually being creative. And when I talk about that, actually it's like that, because I have the feeling that mostly of the time talking about that is something that is reputed like dark. But we are actually creative, and we are actually the human being we have because we are aware about our finitude. So without this big polarity, we couldn't be what we are. And I like to not only to think about the past and to try to have an historical approach, but I really try to see the human being as an entire entity, like global. So I cannot avoid to put on the table this kind of view. Thank you. I don't know.
That's a very good answer, Corinna. I think you are a philosopher artist. I think we have one more question from Bill.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Corinna. A question actually just came up. So it's actually two questions. The one question came up in your response to David's question when you said, absolutely no, I'm not going to bring my emotion into it. Why? I was just going to throw that out there. Like, why can't you not sort of tap into your emotion when you're creating creative work? But that was that came up along the way. And maybe it's more interesting than the second question. So maybe we'll just leave it there.
I don't know. It's my position as an artist. I'm not saying that all the artists has to do that. And also I have to be precise on that declaration, because of course I will bring some of my emotions. I cannot avoid of doing it. So even if I try to control myself, it will happen. But I don't want to, I really don't want to use my emotion as the drive of my work. And I don't know why. You can disagree with me, and I totally understand, but I feel that is my own responsibility as an artist to don't put the thing that interested just me. I don't know. I mean, if I am feeling bad or if I am feeling good, who cares, no?
I care.
I can call you and I can tell you everything, but why, I mean, why you want a piece of work of mine that tell you my story? And remember, it will always like that. I will put my history and my biography, even if I don't want to, because I'm not construct. Even if it seems that I have a very strong and precise methodology when I paint, I do everything like for arrive at the point to be completely free. And I don't want to be invaded by my own emotion. I want to, I'm just not having fun if I just do the thing for me. I don't know why. It's not funny for me.
Okay, I think we'll have what I was about to say thank you, but we had one hand sneak in there, Katie Balch. So one last question, please.
Okay, sorry. We also can just talk about this later, but I guess I'm interested. I'm interested. I also noticed what Bill commented on, and I was wondering, is there a difference to you between like emotional expression and expression of the self or expression of one's identity? Because I do feel like I don't think there is art that isn't an expression of the self.
Yeah. Well, actually, I was trying close to reply the opposite. Like, surely I'm expressing myself, but I don't know. I think also I can reply just that. I don't know exactly the difference. I cannot reply honestly. I have the feeling that I am expressing myself. So you're right. But I think that when I produce, because also we have to remember, you don't know, so we don't have to remember, I have to tell you, that I produce in very, very short moment. So usually I'm studying writing and I condensate the production in a very short period, usually like 3 weeks, and I do everything in the same moment. And in that moment, I am in the work. So my emotions are just in the work. So of course I can be very enthusiastic, I can be kind of happy, but I'm not happy because something in my life happened and I'm happy. In that moment that I am producing, I don't have emotions related to my own biography, I have emotions related to the work. So my emotions in that case are related to the work.
I understand. That's interesting. I want to talk more about that.
Cool. Thank you. With pleasure.
Well, thanks to everyone. What really great questions. And Corinna, I think you really spurred people to think, well, as I said at the beginning of the talk, to think about lots of different things. And so I thank you, and also for holding your own so nicely, to being solo. And thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Buon appetito.
Ciao.
Ciao.